Hey everybody, this is Darren Van Dam and you are watching Flick Connection, the show that helps you get more out of movies. And today I'm going to give you a review of the movie streaming service Tubi. It's a free service supported by ads. I'm going to tell you if it's worth your time, as well as 20 hidden gem movies that you really have to dig for on Tubi right now. So in typical Flick Connection fashion, this is going to be 21-ish minute movie reviews, but first I want to tell you a little bit about Tubi. And first off, this is not a sponsored video. I have no affiliation with Tubi. I gave Tubi a shot and I found that they were not too bad. The ad breaks are short, they're about a minute, and they occur about every 20 minutes, and the streaming quality was good. So overall, my review of Tubi is that it is a good service, at least so far. I've watched a handful of movies, and it was all well worth the time. I didn't feel like I was watching too many ads. I recommend you give it a shot. Look for the Tubi app wherever you watch movies. But here are 20 movies that some are hidden gems you've probably never heard of. You need to go to Tubi to watch. Others are ones you may have been looking for that are not on the surface. In fact, here's a look at what Tubi looks like for me. It is a bunch of crap. This is just when you pull it open. It's a lot of stuff everyone's familiar with and that you're probably tired of. It doesn't look very appealing, but if you do some digging, there's some good stuff here, like the 20 I'm going to tell you about. And these are in no particular order because it's a wide range of genres, including horror, thrillers, dramas, comedies, everything. But I'm starting with one of my personal favorites on the list that I've never talked about on the channel before, and that's The World's Fastest Indian.
How fast you were going back there?
Yeah, about 150, 160 miles an hour.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
Now this stars Anthony Hopkins and is based on the true story of a guy who was going for the land speed record on a modified Indian motorcycle, which is not really what people were using for land speed records. Not only did I find it to be an inspirational story, but it's a really fun movie, and it's one of those movies that you can watch with just about anybody. I think it's got a really broad appeal, and it's just a really kind of nice, enjoyable story, and it's really well made too. Obviously Anthony Hopkins is great in it, but it's well directed, the cinematography is great. It's a really spectacular movie that not enough people appreciated when it came out, but I hope a bunch of you go check it out over on Tubi. One that is not okay to watch with almost anyone except for somebody you know really well is Filth. In Filth, James McAvoy plays a dirty cop, and when I say dirty, I mean a filthy dirty cop. He is up to no good on screen. This is a graphic movie, but it's not just about it being graphic and fun. His character's really great. Now, not a good person by any means, but he's got this really crazy performance in it that I thought was really fantastic. The cinematography is really cool. There's a really odd twist to this one that I thought was forced. I don't know. I didn't feel like it was necessary for the story that they were telling. However, it didn't negate it. I thought there was enough in this movie to like. It's by no means a masterpiece, but it belongs on this list because it is a pretty good little gem. Cashback is maybe one of the first movies I ever watched on Netflix streaming. It was back before they had hardly anything worth watching, and it is a really interesting movie. It's about a guy who is just kind of bored with his life, and he begins to imagine things as he's working the late shift in this store, and among the things that he imagines is basically all the women in it completely naked. There is nudity obviously in the movie as a result, but it's also just a kind of clever indie flick. Like, there's not a lot of special effects and stuff, yet you get these really imaginative sequences that I thought were pretty great, and then the story's pretty compelling, and it moves forward really well. I mean, it's been a long time since I've seen it, but I still remember it really well, and I definitely enjoyed it. A fan favorite of the channel is I Had a Bloody Good Time at House Harker. I've recommended this multiple times, and up until now, the only place you could watch it was either on Blu-ray in Germany, I believe, or on Amazon Prime. So if you do not have an Amazon Prime account and if you've been interested in this movie, you can watch it right now on Tubi. Not only can you watch it on Tubi, but I have a video that I did with one of the creators and stars of House Harker where you kind of get to watch it with us. The only downside is it doesn't allow for the ad breaks, so you may have to do some pausing and stuff if you really wanted to have that experience. but he provided a lot of good backstory and commentary, so maybe watch it once, and if you really love the movie, come back and watch it with the both of us. There's a link to that video in the description, but this is a really fun Halloween movie about vampires. It's graphic, it's bloody, but it's also a lot of fun, and there's a lot of heart to this one as well. Speaking of heart, the most soulless movie on this list is Hard Candy. This one stars Ellen Page and Patrick Wilson. He brings a young girl home with bad intentions. However, she has even worse intentions for him. This is basically a horror movie, but this one is dark, it's grim, it's going to take you to a dark place. It is heavy subject matter, and it's graphic, and it's intense. Once you get on the Hard Candy roller coaster, maybe 20 minutes into the movie, it does not stop. This one really propelled several careers, including the career of the director, and it got a lot of acclaim when it came out. It's been pretty elusive. I have not seen it on streaming services in a while, but here it is on Tubi. Another one that falls into that category of one that I love that has just not been on streaming services and I don't know how long is Running Scared. Now, this is probably my favorite Paul Walker movie. By no means was I like a big fan of his or anything, but this movie was surprisingly good and fun. Now, this is a dark thriller that's got almost like some fantasy elements, at least in the way it's shot. There's some cartoonish elements. There's a crazy shootout at the beginning that is a lot of fun. It's colorful, but it's this really wild journey that involves the mob, and Paul Walker is trying to use this kid to help find some incriminating evidence, and it just gets really twisted, and it's just kind of one crazy night. I talk about movies like that a lot. I love that sort of subgenre. Running Scared is a great one. It has some things in it that don't make sense. By no means is it a really tight narrative, but it's so well done, other than that, and so entertaining, I can overlook that in this one.
Rules are like arbitrary, you know, made up for people who believe in, you know, like Santa Claus. Hey, but not us, right?
The 60s are over. Man.
Now, the 51st State or Formula 51, I believe it's going by the 51st State on Tubi right now. It's also been called Formula 51. This is a Samuel L. Jackson movie that is a lot of fun. Now, another one, it's not really a great movie, but it's fun to watch. He's wearing this kilt the whole time, and he's this really odd character. Robert Carlyle and Emily Mortimer are in this as well. Oh, and Meatloaf has a really crazy role, like his probably second best role next to Fight Club. And it's wild. It's just this crazy drug-fueled thing that's more fun than it probably should be, but also not nearly as good as I wanted it to be. So just for the purposes of ranking, I would put this one as one of the weaker ones on this list of 20, but still worth seeking out if you're interested in the way I'm talking about it. Another favorite of mine on this list is Midnight Run. This stars Robert De Niro as a bounty hunter. This one's almost a buddy cop movie, except they're not cops. He is hunting down Charles Grodin, who is a white-collar criminal, and he refuses to fly, and so he actually has to bring him all the way across the country. So it's also a road trip movie, kind of in the vein of Trains, Planes, and Automobiles. It's rated R, it's got some hard language in it, but other than that, there's nothing too pervasive in it, and it is fun. It's got some classic scenes in it. If you've never seen this one, it is just it's a total gem. It's one of the highest recommendations I've got off of this list. Please go check it out this month.
Could be the devil, you know, could be an ex-girlfriend on PCP.
Whoa! It's a harpy.
You guys get a lot of these?
You'd be surprised.
Kinda.
If you didn't watch enough horror comedies during the month of October, which I recommended plenty, there are some recent videos if you want to look at some of my recent posts. Hell Baby is on Tubi and is one of the funnier horror spoofs that I've seen in a while. This stars Rob Corddry, Leslie Bibb, Keegan-Michael Key. It's a couple having a baby. They're living in this dilapidated mansion in New Orleans, and there's spirits and ghosts and a hobo that comes and goes as he pleases, and just all kinds of craziness that if you're a fan of the horror genre, especially if you like the possession movies like The Exorcist, this is a really fun spoof that plays on that genre really well. A couple of the guys from Reno 911 are the Exorcist priests that come into into play at some point. Just a lot of fun gags, and no way is this one scary whatsoever. It's a little gross at times, but just a lot of fun, especially if you like that Reno 911 humor. Haywire is a Steven Soderbergh movie that I wanted to like so much more. It's this intense action movie starring Gina Carano, Ewan McGregor, Michael Fassbender, Channing Tatum's in it, Michael Douglas, Antonio Banderas. I mean, killer cast. Some of those guys are only in it for a little bit, but it's got some great action sequences in it. This glue that holds the story together is just, it's just non-existent almost, but it doesn't mean it's a bad movie. It just means it's like absolutely mediocre, except for these great performances and otherwise great action movies that, again, just don't really hold together. I think that's why this movie is not still talked about today. However, I did enjoy it in the theater. I just felt maybe a little disappointed that it wasn't a better film overall, especially coming from such a great director like Soderbergh. Before moving on with the rest of the list, if you like this type of content, please click the subscribe button and be sure to click the little bell icon so you get notified when I put out new lists like this one and ones for other streaming services like Netflix and Amazon Prime and Hulu.
Prison was honestly brilliant. I liked it personally. Oh, fuck that. I loved it. It was exciting. It was on the edge. It was madness at its very best.
Now, another top pick for me on this list is Bronson, directed by Nicholas Winding Refn. This stars Tom Hardy as a notorious, in fact, one of the most notorious criminals in England's history. Nicholas Winding Refn would go on to direct Drive shortly after this, and Tom Hardy would go on to play Bane shortly after this, but this is a great effort from the both of them. Hardy's performance is killer in this, and it's directed really well too. Now, this is an indie film with a low budget, and it's aimed at sort of an art house audience, which means it doesn't follow a typical narrative or story arc, so just don't expect that going into it, and you can have a lot of fun with this one. But this guy was brutal. This movie is gnarly. His character is crazy, but it's a lot of fun to watch as a result. Another movie about some crazy fellas is The Devil's Double. Now, this one is a true story about doubles for Saddam Hussein's sons, specifically Uday Hussein. Now, this is a wild premise, but these guys were absolute maniacs, specifically him, and the story is that they would have a double, just like Saddam Hussein, and Dominic Cooper, who you may know from Preacher, he plays both characters, and that's kind of fun to watch too. There's a little bit of a Prince and the Pauper thing where he's playing these two different characters, and then it goes in this crazy direction. This is a very upsetting movie at times, but it's also very colorful and vibrant. You know, Cooper's playing this guy who does not want to be in this position, but he has no choice and has to figure out how to work his way out of it and not get sucked into just the pure evil perpetrated by this family. And they really take you deep into it. This is a really fantastic one. Now, it doesn't have great reviews because it does have flaws, meaning it's no masterpiece, but there's so much good meat on the bone with this one. It's a hard one to miss.
I've never killed a man. I beg your pardon? I said I've never killed a man. I didn't ask if you had. You asked why I thought I was qualified. I think of that as qualification. And I'm just wondering why that in particular strikes you as an important qualification for semen donation. I would say that's a big fucking qualification. Excuse me, a very important qualification. No one's ever said that before. You ever asked? No. You should.
Another really strong recommendation from me is The Way of the Gun. I've loved this movie for a really long time. The director of this has gone on to do the last couple of Mission Impossible movies. This is a modern day Western. If you take the cars out and replace them with horses, you get this wild sort of heist movie, except the target of the heist is not money or gold. It is a pregnant Juliette Lewis. She's a surrogate for a wealthy family. A couple of guys played by Benicio del Toro and Ryan Phillippe kidnap her for ransom, and it's really great. There's some great shootouts in this one. It's a really compelling story, great performances from some others like James Caan has a great role in this, Taye Diggs. So fun cast, really great shootout. One of the best shootouts I think in movie history at the end of this movie. And again, if you watch it as a Western, just set in, I say modern day, but set in the year 2000, I think is about when this came out, It's just top shelf stuff. The Host, directed by Joon-ho Bong from South Korea, who's most famous for movies like Snowpiercer, Okja, and most recently Parasite. This is a fun movie. This is a sci-fi movie. Think like Godzilla. This is a big amphibious monster that is just terrorizing people. There's some great sequences that take place across all one shot. The CGI is slightly dated, but it does not take you out of the movie, and it's just really a good story too. It's not just craziness and buildings collapsing and stuff and people getting eaten. That stuff is in there, but then comes to be this whole thing of figuring out, how did this monster come to be? How do we find it? How do we kill it? And it's all threaded together really well, exceptionally well. Within its genre of a giant monster destroying a city, it's top shelf again because it does everything right. It doesn't slack in any way. If you're a fan of that subgenre, this one is an absolute must-watch if you haven't seen it yet. Nominated for Best Picture last year was The Favorite. Not my favorite from that director. I prefer The Lobster. I've talked about that on the channel before. It's currently on Netflix, but one of his first films, Dogtooth, is actually one of the first films I ever reviewed in writing, and it is available on Tubi. I have not seen it on any other streaming services. I don't think ever, otherwise I would have told you about it, and I've never talked about this movie. Another one, it's graphic, it's upsetting, it's disturbing. If you're on board with that, check this movie out. It is crazy. It does not quite operate within our reality, yet it's just barely removed, which makes it so much weirder. It's kind of almost like an uncanny valley for your mind. It's confusing as to what world this story takes place in, but it's about a family, and they're not allowed to leave the property. Like, they have a sizable house and yard and several teenagers, and they only live on this property. And as a result, there's weird stuff going on and not much of a plot or story to speak of. But if you like my weird movie recommendations, it's difficult to get much weirder than Dogtooth.
What is this? Is this a shifter car? You think that's funny? I'm used to luxury cars. I drive cars that shift themselves. My cars shift themselves.
Another favorite of mine, this is one of my favorite movies of all time. Buffalo 66. I've done a full review on it. There's a link to that video in the description if you want to know a little bit more about it. But this is written, directed, and stars Vincent Gallo. It's one of the only movies he ever did, except, for the one where he got a blowjob for real on screen that basically ruined his career and everyone involved with that movie. However, Buffalo 66 is close to a masterpiece. This is a beautiful movie. He plays a guy who's just been released from jail. He's trying to not just reconnect with his family, but connect with somebody, and as a result, he kidnaps Christina Ricci, which sounds really weird, and it is, but it just turns into this really sort of beautiful movie, and he plays this character that's a very disturbed. If you've been a fan of my channel for a long time and you like my recommendations and you feel like we have very, very similar tastes in movies, you have to watch this movie. Even if you're not that interested in Tubi, after my pitch, sit through the commercials, and if you can't do that, just buy it on Amazon or something, because I think this is an important movie to watch more than once. Another Western, I probably should have put those next to each other on the list, but The Proposition is actually from Australia. If you know anything about world history, or specifically the history of the country of Australia, their founding and their journey is very similar to that of America, and as a result, they had a Wild West period very, very similar to ours, and The Proposition takes place during that. It's got an amazing performance from Guy Pearce, as well as several other really, really fantastic performances, but it's grungy, it's dirty, it's a dark story about an outlaw who needs to hunt down his older brother to save his younger brother. That's all set up for you very early on in the movie, but just a brutal, brutal lifestyle back then, both there and here, and that's partly what I love about Westerns, and to me, this is one of the more realistic Westerns you're gonna see, because it really shows just how hard you had to be to live during that period. Just a really fantastic film too. The score is done by Nick Cave, one of my favorite musicians. The cinematography is amazing in it as well. Just a beautiful, beautiful movie about a really rough time to be a human being. Now, to lighten things up, Bubba Ho-Tep is a Bruce Campbell movie that is a lot of fun. Doesn't quite come close to his just pure classics, but it's a great one. It's from the same creator as Phantasm and John Dies at the End, but this is certainly his lightest movie, and it's a lot of fun. Bruce Campbell plays an Elvis impersonator who's living in a retirement home, and there's spirits and stuff that are starting to sort of haunt him, and he's trying to figure out what's going on with it. So it's a horror comedy, but it's not just a horror comedy, it's really just kind of a fun Bruce Campbell romp that's really tongue-in-cheek, and again, just a lot of fun. If you're a fan of that genre and you like the other Bruce Campbell movies, or you like Ash vs. Evil Dead or anything like that, you've probably seen Bubba Ho-Tep, but if you haven't, definitely check this one out. If you've seen some of that other stuff and you're not a fan of it, I don't know that Bubba Ho-Tep is gonna be the one that's gonna lock you in as a fan. A lot of people went nuts for the Suspiria remake last year, but it has been impossible to find the original on a streaming service, but it's part of a trilogy directed by Dario Argento. You can watch this one by itself. It's sort of a loose trilogy about witches. This is the best one by far, the most classic one, the one that has held up over time, the one that they just remade, but it's got beautiful lighting and a spooky vibe to it, and it's really great stuff. If you've never seen it and you consider yourself a horror fan, you need to put this at the top of the list. And another great reason to check out Tubi is I don't know where else you can watch this one without paying for it. And then finally, in a similar vein, Beyond the Black Rainbow is from Panos Cosmatos, the director who did Mandy. If you liked Mandy from 2018 and you want to see more from that director, Beyond the Black Rainbow, in my opinion, is not as good, mainly in the sense that it's not quite as tight as a narrative. Now, some of you will laugh at that because you didn't think Mandy had a tight narrative. Beyond the Black Rainbow is looser. There's a lot less that goes on in it, but it is visually just really amazing. It's psychedelic. It feels like Stanley Kubrick. Now, it doesn't feel like he directed it, but it certainly feels like someone watched a lot of Stanley Kubrick and then did something else with it. It feels like the ghost of Stanley Kubrick or something, you know what I mean? It's not him, it's not as good, but it's similar and it's haunting. So I hope you like that list. I hope you found something to watch, and hopefully you like Tubi. Hopefully you check it out. I mean, I get no benefit from it other than the fact that maybe I've got a new streaming service I can give you movie recommendations on. If you like it and you want more Tubi, please like this video and leave a comment and let me know. That's the only way I'm gonna do more of them, is if you let me know, and if this video gets a bunch of views, I'll do more like it, but I'll definitely be back with more Netflix stuff. Speaking of that, be sure to thank the Patreon supporters. They let me step out and kind of experiment and do things like this because I don't have to rely on getting a bunch of views on this particular video. I can sort of see how this is gonna work. It's because they're supporting the channel and they give me a little bit of extra slack. If you'd like to become a Patreon supporter, just check out the link in the description, see if it's for you. But everyone over there gets additional movie recommendations almost every week now. I'm trying to make that a regular habit. So there are benefits to becoming a supporter in addition to just helping the show out. But I will keep making videos similar to this one as long as you keep watching them. Thanks for checking out this Tubi episode, and you will see me on the next one.